Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz, and I would like to speak with you today, introduce my Ramadan 2026 series. And I have begun a series in the past titled My Students, My Patients, and I. And this will be introducing the 2026 Ramadan series of that particular episode or that particular program. Let me explain why this title and why this series. In this series, my students, my patients, and I want to speak calmly and clearly about a pattern I've observed for many years. It's a pattern that involves my work, my writings, and the way they are repeatedly used by others without acknowledgement. But it's not just the lack of acknowledgement, it's also the abuse as they lack the acknowledgement, as well as misrepresentation and just plainly false claims that they have not produced court admissible evidence to support. Let me name the pattern without accusation. We're about Ramadan, so I don't want to get into gossip. I don't want to slander anyone. I've spent years, I have the records, I have the notes, I have the writings, listening to arguments thrown at Muslims, studying them, researching them, responding with reason. I showed that Islam has arguments, strong arguments, for all of those responses that were brought forth or those critiques that were thrown at Muslims. I did the intellectual labor publicly, transparently, and with evidence. No one stopped any of these institutes or scholars, or anyone for that matter, from doing the same. They had full freedom to respond, to engage, to contribute. When I was doing my research, I did not really find credible answers from them, from their institutes. And even sometimes the answers they gave did not reconcile with the Quran. I mean, it was like their own egotistical answer, but not from the Quran or from Hadith. And I had to go myself to the tafsir, the scholarly commentary, and other books and writings, and did the intellectual labor on my own, saying, here's the response for this, here's the response for that. But then when I started to publicly share some of the writings, some of the works, they shifted into appropriation. Once my work was done, once I started to show the arguments and I started to present them, it appeared that they were following my every post, my every tweet, and I tested them. You do something on live stream and sure enough, they catch it. You do something like, hidden in a blog or a video, and sure enough, they catch it. And they not just catch it, but they get the worst meaning and they try to misrepresent you, slander you. But the troubling thing was, they never clarified, verified, or confirmed, which is like the very bedrock, of Islam is all about the argument about other faiths that Islam raises is, if you are truthful, provide your evidence if you are truthful. And I didn't see any court admissible evidence. Once the dust settled, they had really no response. It was just a familiar pattern returned. Same individuals and institutions who dismissed me, ignored me, or smeared me, or tried to undermine me by using my arguments, my frameworks, my language while pushing me aside. The deflection they use, some try to reduce my entire intellectual journey to a question I might have asked 20 years ago, and they overlook all the research that I have done before asking that question and after asking that question. So they ignore the decades of work that previously before that question, even that followed, the articles, the videos, the reflection, the theological frameworks, the responses to critics, all of that is erased. This shows just a desperate need to undermine me, that they search for something 20 years ago. They literally use the tactics Islamophobes use against Muslims. You know how they go search. Oh, Prophet Muhammad married Aisha. And then they throw in that she was 9. And it gets in, they take you into, again, distraction about something. And here you are talking about the bedrock of Islam, which is about God. And worship God, and worship God alone. And they go on again to undermine Islam. They search, and they find something that they don't understand. And then they just exaggerate it, amplify it, misrepresent it, but create a controversy over something without clarification, without verification, without confirmation. Like if they were searching for the truth, they would reach to a Muslim and say, hey, I read this. Can you help me understand it? Kind of like I asked the question 20 years ago. But the troubling thing was, this is how they responded too. They were like looking. They find something. They don't reach out. Exactly the tactics of Islamophobes. They exaggerate it. They misrepresent it. They amplify it. They start having talk shows and discussions about it. And they make it to be larger than life. And they erase everything else that I wrote about, I did videos about, my 2 books, everything. They erase all of that growth, and they just go ahead and then, while amplifying something that happened 20 years ago, like you asked a question, and you asked a question, I don't even want to give the details of the question, but they exaggerate it, they manipulate, similar to the tactics of Islamophobes with the Aisha at age 9 story. All to justify erasing my work, my writings, which they follow and they take. And the inability to cite the author, say, I really like your work. We'd like to use it for our program. The gendered mechanism. Another recurring part of this pattern is to transfer my work to some women who have literally, I went to the library, I searched their name, and I searched for what they started to write about. They have no prior record of writing or speaking on these things. If I research, because people ask questions like, why did God create Satan? I research it and I come up with, and I say, this is the scholar, Sheikh Sha'rawi, I read it, listened to his, all his lectures. Here's what he said, and it was a phenomenal argument. They're suddenly positioned as authorities after my material is handed to them. So they spend all this time gossiping, chit-chatting with each other, having wonderful social bonding. I'm sitting here doing the research, doing the work, listening, spending time listening to scholar, that scholar. And as soon as I finish doing the work, then they start to collude with each other and transfer all that work that I'm doing while they're chit-chatting and gossiping and enjoying, social bonding circles. Then they take the work and transfer it to them. Suddenly, Sarah Sultan is raising my arguments. Suddenly, there's this lady named Tasneem. She's raising my arguments. Suddenly, you have Ruhi Tahir. She's raising my argument. Suddenly, Lubna Mullah. She's raising like my arguments, and so on and so on and so on. It's like you can't do something original that I could like listen to what you done. You claim to have PhDs. You must have something original to share to the conversation. And so I ask, I guess, an obvious question. If my work is so unworthy, why do you use it? Why do you create Ramadan series after Ramadan series or programs after programs using my work? Why do you use it if it's unworthy? Why do you attach the work to your institute? If my arguments are so flawed, why do you adopt them? Why do you put your name on those arguments? Like you create a meme, they take my argument, they create a meme, and then they put their name to my arguments as though it came from their mind. If my thinking is so insignificant, why do you build programs on it? People do not steal what they consider worthless. They steal what they cannot produce. So if you could produce something like it, why didn't you produce it? Why didn't you study instead of saying, I don't listen to those people, when you know that people are attacking and attacking and attacking. And the Quran clearly says, Jahidhum fil Quran. It says right there in the Quran. We inspired, this is, it's for John the Baptist, Yahya, alayhi salam. And I used to read that verse to my mom. I would be like helping her to read the Quran when she had a stroke. Respond with the Quran. Respond with the Quran. So I studied the Quran. I read the tafsir. I read the scholarly commentaries, and I researched what people would argue, and I would respond. Why didn't you do likewise? Why didn't you go study the Quran, listen to all the tafsir, and then respond? Nobody stopped you. If you had your PhDs, it means you had an easier and more access to scholars, and you could have immediately, because you were ahead of the race, you already had like first access, and you were like right there to the books. I have to rely on listening to a lot of their tafsir, and I have to research and I have to listen to more than one time. So you already had an advantage. You could have immediately went ahead and produced this work on your own. Why didn't you produce it? It's the question. Why isn't there any work that predates mine by you and members of your institute? I'm not reacting. I am going to be documenting. And I'm going to be reclaiming my work publicly because authorship matters, integrity matters, and the community deserves clarity. They had advantage. They had access. They could have produced the work on their own. They could have written books on their own. Why do they wait for me to produce a theme, to produce the work? And then they have this chit-chatting conversation with these women, and they transfer my work to them. And they're probably gossiping on who knows what, because their entire social bonding is about gossip. This is what I see coming original from them. When I look to see what's original, it's gossip. As I've said before, if anyone continues to use my work without citation, very calmly, I will simply acknowledge them as my students. When people repeatedly learn from my writings, teach from my writings, build programs from my writings while refusing to cite my writings, the only accurate description is that they learned from me. This series is not about conflict. It's not about gossip. And it's not about he said, she said, I heard it through the grapevine, which is their trademark. It's about truth. I researched, I studied arguments, I responded, I created themes, writings, they're public. It's about preserving my ideas and the labor I've put into them to produce them. It's about ensuring that the record remains clear. I will continue to monitor each program, and I will reclaim my work calmly, publicly, transparently, and with dignity. I hope I have made it very clear. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah wa barakatuh.